Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Building Experiences with me, Mark Schultz, and looking forward to a great show today. If you've just tuned in for the first time, you're wondering what on earth is this? This is where we try and have a bit of fun, talk about some topics related to building experiences, and have some great guest speakers joining me to make the conversation fun and hopefully interesting. So today we're going to talk about a topic that comes up quite often is around headless and thinking about the way we can deliver experiences, not just to web channels, but to many, many different channels. And to join me, let's welcome our guest for today. Zoran, welcome to the show.
Hello, everyone.
Great to have you back, mate.
Love that cheer.
It's a studio audience, You're all excited. And mate, I have to call it out for many people who know you. The beard's gone.
I know. It's weird. Like everyone went ISO beard while they were in lockdown. I went reverse just to try something different.
Good it's gonna come back. Putting the mask on and off, right? It just ripped the hair off.
yeah. It's like I was wearing a mask, and voila.
Yeah. So very topical actually. If we're talking headless today, you've kind of just started removing parts of the head.
Yeah, I'm systematically leaning the head.
Yeah, good for you. But with AEM, of course, many people know AEM for many years as being a really good web CMS. And of course, we have new needs in today's world with different channels and experiences. So we want to, spend today, we'll talk through a few topics. I think you and I talked through around, repurposing web content, but then looking at content fragments. We're going to get in and talk about, different APIs that you can call to get to that content. And then you're going to remind everyone of a few behind the scenes tools to do queries, etc. So sounds like a bit of fun, huh?
Yeah, look, I'm looking forward to it. As you know, this is one topic that I'm quite passionate about, and we've had many conversations with customers recently because obviously everyone's kind of exploring, or not even just exploring. Everyone's quite serious about delivering experiences everywhere, so not just the web. It's always good to kind of have that conversation and see how we can help them.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get straight into it. All right, we always try and have a good featured topic, and today's topic, of course, is headless. So, Zoran, I know you've got quite a few things to show us today, so how about I hand the screen over to you and you can get straight into it.
Thanks, mate. Sounds like a plan. Look, I really wanted to start from something that's very foundational and basic when it comes to AEM, and that's the Humble page. Right? We all know, and the AEM can run your website. Websites can contain a number of pages. A page typically is an HTML construct that you can see on my screen at the moment. But one of the things that I guess not everyone is really aware about AEM, but on top of the fact that AEM can generate an HTML response such as the one that you can see right now, AEM pretty much from the get-go is actually able to generate a JSON output of things, and so it's really a simple proposition. I mean, I've got a URL that is this page. I can just simply go in and change the extension to JSON, and just like that, I've got a JSON output. Now, two things to note here. Number one, it's fairly light.
It's I would say it's exciting, really.
Yes, there's nothing in here basically that'll be meaningful for everyone. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that the way this looks in my browser, just in case someone's confused, this is not AEM styling the JSON output. This is actually an extension that I use for Edge that's available for Chrome as well. So let's get back to our topic at hand. So obviously, like I said, this is fairly light and not really informative. But in AEM, you can control the depth of the JSON output quite easy. So I can start with I can say at level zero, which gives me this default view. Level one, I'm starting to already see a little bit more content popping back, and I can go through the numbers, or I can just type in infinity, which, as it suggests, it basically renders out the entire structure for that page that's represented in the AEM repository. And while we're on the topic of the repository, it's very important to understand where this output comes from. So the reason why AEM supports a JSON output out of the box, it's because AEM is built on top of what we call JCR, which is our content repository, which is where everything that is in AEM lives. And this is important because the way JCR or Jackrabbit was built to begin with, and then on top of that, the new version called Oak, and so on and so forth. The way that they were built around these fundamental REST API principles, where either a thing is either a resource or it's a collection of resources. So effectively, if I look at a something that's and everything in AEM is URL addressable. So if I look at a URL address and I look at it as a JSON output, then I can see either a resource, which is the case here, or I will see a collection of resources that node represents. So think about, if it's a folder, then I'm going to see a list of resources that live under that folder, and so on and so forth. So this is very important to understand, because it fundamentally powers a lot of the concepts that AEM traditional or classic utilizes, but it also means that you can even without anything in between, you can directly communicate to the AEM repository and get a JCR content out. And then, I mean, to kind of look at this practically as well. Let's it's not just that we assemble a JSON output, but if I look at say and drive that for web content, but if I look at a practical example, and I know this is an experience fragment, but in reality, experience fragments are a kind of a page, and they are for all intents and purposes a resource.
Yeah.
But by simply using a component that I can drag and drop onto the experience fragment variation and have multiple variations themselves, I can very quickly build out actual experiences that I can, number one, author in AEM, number two, preview in AEM, but then I can also deliver and deploy on any channel. And again, as you can see in my variations, there are some that are for web, there are some that are there for mobile, for chatbot, for voice, Facebook, Pinterest, etc. And even with this,
and Zoran, before you go on, I mean, one of the key reasons to do this, right, is often when we talk about headless, we're very much focused on a developer workflow and getting the right information out in the right API, but we need to be conscious of the authoring workflow as well, right? And so, this example that you've put together is really around having a view of the one message in all the different contexts, and then being able to say, okay, is there a variation? Is the wording from the mobile experience slightly different, but still has a relation back to the main offer, as does the chatbot, as does everything else?
Absolutely, and I mean the whole reason why AEM is there in the first place is to be able to give authors the power and flexibility to be able to author those experiences in tools that they understand and are comfortable with.
Yeah.
Yes, as a developer, I can build an application that will render this. But if you think about having to manage that in various different applications and build everything from scratch for that application without necessarily giving the authors a context, it becomes a very a very laborious conversation between your marketing and your digital teams oftentimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Right. So the other thing, so if we come back to my humble little API or a JCR JSON output here, I mean, we're showing you a page output, but like I said, everything in AEM is a resource, and by that extension, everything in AEM can be addressed via a JSON output. So let's think about a content fragment. So I've got an example of a structured content fragment here. It's got a few properties, so title, description, release date, image, and a list of actors. So just if you haven't guessed so far, this is a content fragment that represents a movie. But let's see what happens if I do apply the same principle to this. So again, if I just type in JSON, I get a few properties already available. It tells me that it's an asset, when it was created and by whom, and so on and so forth. And again, the same principle applies. I'll just shortcut straight into the full output. But in here, I can start looking at I get the same set of properties, but then I also get the content. I get the data of the content fragment and the variation that's available. In this case, just the master, and then all the properties that I saw on my editor user interface. So title, description, hero image, and actors, and so on and so forth. Now, one thing that this the JCR JSON approach also allows me to do is simply walk the tree. And so what I mean by that is, well, if I look at this, right, I know that I've got a JCR content node. So what happens if I actually type that node in? So now I get a JSON output, but now instead of the full content fragment, I just focus on the content node. And furthermore, if I actually start diving in, so I know there's a data node and there's my master variation. And so very quickly, I can walk the tree all the way down to where I actually have the information that I need. And so this is very convenient when you know your starting point, and and you have a very structured organization, like with a content fragment. So if I know where I want to start, let's say I've got a folder in my DAM. That's where I have all my movies, movie categories, movies, and etc. I can very easily walk the tree and get all of that information available to me in either a single hit or chunks that I can optimize my user experience and the way that I consume this data. So that's kind of a very quick and simple way to basically start using AEM as a service, really, to provide certain content, and that's to be able to consume the content from AEM. But as you might know as well, AEM has more than one way to consume content or work with the content in AEM. We like to give our customers options as always. So we didn't skip on the APIs as well.
Yeah, and I think that's like right API for the right purpose, right? So
exactly.
Obviously the heritage of AEM is a very page-like structure and having a hierarchy of a website, but the same applies no matter what experience, that you have a hierarchy of content. But let's walk through some of the different ways to get access to content. So what if I don't have a page? What if I've just got content fragments?
Yeah. So I mean, look, as we saw, even with a content fragment, we can use the JCR JSON approach. But let's think about kind of the use cases, right? So let's think about the use case when you need to integrate AEM with other systems at a system level.
Yep.
So it's not all of a sudden it's not only enough to kind of just expose a read API. You want to be able to say ingest content into AEM. So if I think about, say, a creative workflow. Like there'll be a whole number of streams of creative assets that a creative studio will have.
Yep.
And they will be managed into different environments and all. And so if you want to be able to stream those all into AEM, you need some convenient way to do that. And this is where we develop what we call our API service. It's a purpose-built API, which relies on an API JSON API definition called Siren. Feel free to look it up. So basically, it'll give you a description as to what each of these entities mean. But what is really good about this API is that, number one, it's very specific to the assets world of AEM. So you get a very focused entry point into the AEM platform, but it also is a full CRUD API, and that means you can create, read, update, and delete resources within AEM using this API. And like I said,
give me an example. Why would you want to create something via the API?
Right. So, like I said, let's say I've got a system where I need to manage some content.
Yep.
Or I need to create some assets. So say I've got an MRM, or I've got even let's say talking about Magento, which is our commerce solution. Think about whether I've got product assets that I've got in Magento, or I've got some other assets that are in my MRM, and I want to push them into AEM for some additional processing. If I want to use them to build up parts of some other experiences that are not necessarily relevant to the other system, that way I can start consolidating all my assets into the one location and build AEM as the central system.
So you in the past, I know you built a couple of examples. One is creating offers based on another system. So the backend system manages the offers. An API call comes in, the offer is created, then a copywriter can go in and add the content, and then that could be used in a page. Another example is store locations, right? So you might have a backend database that you want to have all the store locations come in. So when a change happens, you can go and create them. So a couple of good use cases there. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if someone on the live stream actually has an idea or an example where they've used this. It's always interesting, at least for me, to hear what customers are doing with our toolkit.
Yeah. So well, it's a good reminder. This is a live stream, so if you have comments or questions, feel free to type them in on the box. Over to the that side. Yep, I always get that wrong. Yep.
It's funny when you're pointing that way. You on my screen, you're pointing at me, so it's quite funny.
Yeah. So just chat with Zoran. Yeah.
Talk to me.
Yeah. We mentioned machine to machine. So chatbots. I know we're going to do a whole show on chatbots as well, but it's a good example where there's no presentation happening within AEM, but I want to be able to manage the content and push that out as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and I know you're gonna cover off this in far more detail in the upcoming chatbot session.
Yep.
But absolutely, I mean, chatbots and voice control systems alike are quite unique in that aspect where there's no visual interface. So. We've built a couple of examples where we use this same API and combine that with content fragments to build out a pretty much an end-to-end dialogue system for a chatbot. So AEM powers up the content, powers not only the actual content snippets within the dialogues, but the actual dialogue itself, which is quite powerful.
Yeah, and I know when we're talking about headless. We were talking about the fact that you don't often know where the content is, or sometimes you want to get variations of the content and query it. So
yes.
You mentioned that, hey, there's been functionality in AEM for a long time. So maybe you can show us what that looks like.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, what we've talked about so far is when we actually know where our resources live, and so we can navigate to them. But what if we don't? And again, AEM does provide the tools for this as well. Now, this is personally one of my favorite tools in AEM because it's absolutely powerful in what it can do, and relatively simple to start using and building. And that's the query builder API and or query builder tool itself. Now, what you're seeing here is the Query Builder Debugger tool. And again, this comes with AEM, so everyone that's got an AEM environment can actually access this and start playing around. But I just wanted to quickly walk you guys through it, and I'll just zoom in for just so it's a little bit more visible. But the way it works is really you start constructing a question to ask AEM, and you specify a couple of parameters that you want to ask AEM. And so in my example here, I'm looking for any resource that's an asset, and I'm limiting where I want to search by specifying an exact a path where I want to start. I also then limit. I want to limit the results so that it only comes back with content fragments. So I know that every content fragment, and again coming back to structured content, I know that every content fragment has this, but inside their JCR content, they've got a property called content fragment with value true. So I will put that in so that my search only searches for resources that satisfy that condition. And there's a couple of kind of formatting controls here that basically say I want to return the full JCR response. I want to go down 10 nodes deep from where I've found my result. and I want to return all of my results in one go. Now, one of the cool things about this about the query builder is that it also supports pagination by default, and so you can control the amount of results that you get. So you can kind of you can optimize the user experience rather than getting a massive hit of like hundreds of results potentially in one go. And so if I do a search. So in the debugger, it'll tell me what the results are, but I also have this JSON query builder link, and if I actually open that up, I'll get an API call essentially within AEM that has all of those properties that I've defined in the URL. So I can literally use my debugger tool to kind of build up my query, make sure that it works, make sure that it's returning the right results, and then I can go and start using that in my in my system that's going to consume it. And again, as you see here, so it's got a rigid structure in terms of how it starts, but once you get into the actual results, it is again the JCR output that we walked through before, and so same thing. So it gets down to fairly deep. Now, one thing with this particular output, it is quite chatty. So I appreciate that when and I'm the same when I consume a JSON output. Sometimes it's kind of difficult to go through all of these things and identify what they are, identify if I need them or not, and so on and so forth. So again, the query builder allows you to address that as well. So one of the things that you can do, and again, this is the same search. The two notable differences is I've got a list of properties that I want to return, and instead of returning the full output, I'm returning a selective output. So basically, by saying that my results are going to be selective and specifying the list of properties that I'm going to return, I get a much more optimized output in my results. So rather than get all of those properties that belong to all those nodes, I get a very deliberate response, and that way when I hand this API call to any of my consuming systems, they know exactly what they're seeing in their results. So that's kind of if you think about kind of how this to put it in the context of like traditional applications, it's almost like treating AEM as the database or the JCI repository as the database where you're actually querying things. This supports obviously this API format, but it also supports XPath and SQL, so you can pick and choose the language that you're gonna query AEM in. The one really cool thing that I do want to point out, because I'm sure some of the technical people in the audience are going to have a question around, but what if I have too many results? What if I need to traverse a large part of the repository? The good news with this is that you can actually apply Lucene indexes. So you can index just like with a database, you can apply an index on your content. So all of this becomes a lot more optimized and less resource intense. And as with everything else with AEM, you can cache the response in your dispatcher, so you can further optimize like that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that comes up quite often, right? Is how expensive
Yep.
is this query on the system perspective?
Yes.
It looks like it's called effectively once, and then that query is cached, and then it can be reused. So.
Yep.
I'm just thinking about what a front end developer might look at this and say, okay, well, how much control do I have? Do I need to get a back end developer to go and build all this for me? It looks like this is maybe somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So look, I mean, you kind of have a level of control over the output, and obviously, it's ultimately data nodes that are part of the JCI response.
Yep.
So that's kind of the starting point. As with everything else, and like I said, AEM is a tiered system, so JCI is just one of the tiers. So there's always options to go the next step.
Yeah. And I know, like, for some people, when they think headless, it's not necessarily another channel. It could be like a spa,
Yep.
on the same site. So I know you've built something to show on that front.
Yep. I certainly did. And look, I think I also know that there's another episode in that we're gonna delve down deeper into some of the more interesting SPA concepts that AEM supports.
Yeah, it's coming up in a couple of weeks. So
There we go.
watch out for that one.
Yeah, this show is becoming just a shameless plug. That's fine. But yeah, so like Mark pointed out, so this is kind of a middle ground between the raw content and a selective output. But let's say that we want to take this a little bit further, and let's say that we want to build a bit of an experience around it. So what I did was I built this little application that takes the response from a query builder API, and then uses another element in AEM, which is our Sling models, to build an API that is basically more to contract. So everyone that works with APIs know that APIs basically come with a contract that all the systems that produce them or consume them need to respect. So if I go back to my analogy where JCI becomes the database and you query the database, Sling models become kind of that model that sits on top and allows you a further degree of flexibility. And so to give you guys a bit of an example of that, let's look at an output that I get from my custom service. So this service queries my movies catalog and comes back with my results. And in that result, it gives me my title of the movie, the description of the movie, the poster image, and a list of actors that are part of that movie. And now, obviously, this is very trivial data, and not something that's real, but it could be, right? And the way this is done is, I'll just quickly drag this to the top of my screen so you can see. But I've got a class that let me just hide my. That's okay. I've got a class that that is my servlet, and so what it does is it uses the query builder language to construct the search, and then it uses the results of that search to actually construct my final output, and that final output is based on these Sling models that reference my movie. So let me pull that aside. And so that's how I get this response. Now, a couple of things that you can then extend just a simple output with is that you can add search capability. Now, again, this search capability is actually still powered by the same query builder, because the query builder supports full text search, which again can be indexed. So I can very quickly build an API that is very flexible. I can control the output of, and more importantly, then I can hand that off to my front end developer, and they can build an experience that becomes an extension or an application on top of this API. And so I can get I can see my same content fragments, but I can see them styled. I can see them within the context of a React app. In this particular example, this can be just as easily, it can be a mobile app, it can be anything else. And in fact, I'm gonna put Mark a little bit on the spot, and because I know you've been working on a pretty cool demo example to kind of showcase a lot of these capabilities. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to check how that's coming along.
Yeah, thanks for the awkward plug there. It's work in progress. It wasn't. It was meant to be done in time for today, but I'll be recording and sharing that soon. But the idea is to say that, you know, we need to think about the authoring experience and the developer experience. And you know, this example is a really good one. This is a spa that could be standalone, but it could also be within the page. And we've got a lot of customers now are handing back to the business the management of the content within applications, using content fragments and using AM capability, but you know, delivering them as spa. So yes, we'll have a separate session on single page apps, but also there's a lot of work coming as well. And I'm surprised there's no comments yet, because this comes up quite often. What's Adobe doing with GraphQL? And you know, right now, all I can say is that we're working on it. There is call for beta participants. I can't commit to a time frame, obviously, but if you're interested in that, then feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, GraphQL is something that I'm very excited about, and yeah, I can't wait for that to land. So stay tuned.
Yeah, but that gives us then the ability to manage all of our content in one place. Of course, the web channels aren't going away, but then single page apps, native applications. So, you know, in the demo that you know you're helping me with, we've got some native applications built in Swift. You know, the consuming content. We've got chatbots, which there's a whole session coming up for. You know, we've done labs at Adobe Summit in the past, and then, you know, beyond that, we have the ability to then take it into, you know, Amazon Echo devices. I won't say her name because she's sitting right here on my desk, and it's not her time to talk. But yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit, and you know, there's investment in you know, making this functionality even easy to use. So all pretty good stuff. So anything else before we move on to the additional parts?
Yeah, I just wanted to, so while we're on the topic of GraphQL, one kind of thing to be very excited about is, I mean, obviously show you how you can build a custom API that sort of limits the output that you get from AEM just by default, and then consume that in a React app. with GraphQL, you don't need to even build that, because GraphQL will simply allow you to do that within the query itself. So it'll be a lot more faster to get to the content and get the experience into the channel. So that's a huge bonus right there.
Yeah, and of course that's coming, but in the product today, there's ways to get the content you need, and I think one of the things that I keep quite often is the flexibility, right? So GraphQL, you're going to hit a wall at some stage if there's certain things you need. The ability to use some of the other APIs depending on the use case, but then also being able to extend and customize, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of what you showed today is like out of the box functionality, just with some minor tweaks. Then you get into Sling models, yes, that's Java code, but it's not extensive work.
No, not really.
Redefine, how you want the output of something to look.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that topic as well, I know we've mentioned. I think we've mentioned core components almost in every episode of the show, which is great because they're awesome and everyone should use them. But one of the things that core components come with is pre-baked Sling models. So effectively, if you're using core components for your page, a lot of this comes for free. So you don't even need to worry about having to build sort of JSON outputs for yourself. It's already there.
Yeah. So I mean, in theory, right? You can create a page, but it's really a container, right? We just call it a page. For a mobile app, you could go and drag and drop a few components. You could immediately publish that and have an API exposed with zero coding, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And in fact, I mean, we've seen this. We see this with we see customers doing this already. So it's definitely field tested.
Yeah, and then the advantage is because of the web authoring capabilities, you can put proxy UI in front of it that simulates what it looks like within the app. And I mean, that's part of the demo that we're rebuilding. So stay tuned for that. And maybe a good time to plug, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. That way you get the notification that there's new content. But we'll get that out and share it. And there's some good examples out there as well. So
and trust me, you wanna subscribe, if not for anything but for that demo, because it's really good.
Cool. So I'm conscious of time. Maybe let's get into some of the cool links and things that you wanted to share.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So what have you got for us?
Well, I've got a few tools that I wanted to highlight because I think they're incredibly important given kind of where we are with AEM, and especially with AEM Cloud Services being our new flagship. And so a couple. So the first tool, and the way that we kind of the way that we order these is in a logical flow that kind of goes from getting you from where you are to basically be ready for AEM Cloud Services, or even the latest AEM kind of 6.5x version, or 6.5 plus. So the first set of tools is what we call the AEM modernization tools. Now, these are open source tools that Adobe provides, and we do maintain them. I do also strongly encourage customers to modify these as it suits their own use cases, but also contribute back some improvements as they make. But the modernization tools is really a collection of 4 tools. Number one is the page structure converter, and this is basically a tool to migrate you from the old what we call the static AEM templates to editable templates. Then it's the policy importer. So policy importer is to modify existing design configurations and convert them into policies for editable templates. Give me for a sec. And then there's two other, which is the component converter and the dialog converter. Sorry, it's just a quick sec.
It's all right. You're so excited with talking about headless that you've lost your voice.
I did. I apologize for that. All right,
That's quite all right.
back in business. So we got the component converter, which basically converts your old components into and maps them into new or core components. And the last one is the one that sort of existed for the longest, which is the dialog converter, which is to convert your old classic dialogues into the latest Coral 3 dialogues. Now, all of these converters and importers are customizable, and they have their limits. So, the dialog converter might not be able to convert all of your dialogues, but it will convert a majority of them. And so then that at least takes care of the it's the 80-20 rule, right? It takes care of about 80% of the job, and then you're left with the 20% to get it all done, rather than having to do all of it by hand. So please check those out, because they're very useful, and I do talk about them and with customers.
Yeah, very useful.
Yep. The next kind of tool that I wanted to show is one that we recently released, and there's already an updated version, so we're working constantly on it. And it's this Cloud Readiness Analyzer tool. So what that means is it's a package that you install in your existing AEM environment, and it works from AEM 6.1 upwards. But what that does is, once you run it, it actually generates a report to tell you what areas of your AEM environment, and specifically your own code packages. Let me zoom in. Might be violating constraints that exist in cloud services. So this is an exceptionally useful tool if you're considering migrating to cloud service and you want to see where you're at. And so the idea is that once you run it, you know what you need to address, and then as you're addressing things, you can constantly rerun the analysis and make sure that you're tracking well.
Do you? So I mean, some people might not be looking at cloud service yet, and that's a whole nother consideration. Do you think this tool's useful for people just to use day in, day out to make sure they're adopting best practice?
Absolutely. I mean, there's things like, it checks for things like a classic dialog. So there's a benefit right there, right? It checks for Coral 2 dialogues. It checks for custom components and static templates. So basically everything that we looked in the modernization tools, you will actually get a very nice report in this tool as well to start to base your work off. And like Mark said, it's not necessarily that you're going to do this for cloud services, but as a modernization of AEM activity in general.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yep.
You've got one more.
And I've got one more. We're almost there. So the last one that I wanted to show is this. Now this one's specifically for cloud services. I'm afraid, but it's also what makes it awesome. So let's say that you're moving to cloud services and you wanna move your existing content over, and you don't want to have to create a package, then upload it somewhere, and then or upload it to AEM, and then AEM does its thing. What you can do is you can install, and again, this comes as a package available on our new software distribution website. But you install it as a package in your existing AEM environment, and then you create a migration set. And what a migration set really is you point it to your cloud service author instance. You provide the access token that you're going to use to actually connect to that environment. You specify a few things like where do you want to include historical versions, which paths you want to include to this set, and then you hit save. And then in the background, and then you can kick this off to actually migrate, and that will run in the background and not only move the content, but make sure that all of the nodes and properties and and structure is automatically translated into cloud services structure. So it's super useful for migrating large parts of your content.
Yeah, and I think that's just some of the work that Adobe's doing to make it easier to move to cloud, so it doesn't become a big onerous task, and more to come, right? So as you said, the readiness evaluation tool has already been updated, and we're looking at some of the areas that need some help there, and building out some tools to assist with. So
yeah, so if there's people on the chat that are actually looking to cloud services, I would love to hear your experience with these tools as well. So if you're running them and you have a feedback, let us know, because these tools are built for you.
Yeah, awesome. Alrighty. Unfortunately, we know streamers don't like to stay on for hours and hours, so we're going to keep this one tight today. But Zoran, I want to thank you so much for your time and joining the show. It's always good to have your insights. Can we get you back again?
Of course.
Good.
Of course. I love to be on your show. I think I'm your first repeat.
You are the first repeat, and you're about to be the first triple guest, or whatever you call that. So it's actually worth plugging at the moment that this is the first session for July. If you're in North America and you're up late, it is July in Australia already, and we've got 5 live streams planned for July. So again, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. But to give you a quick plug, we have a session next week with the Project Firefly team, talking about how they're using Adobe Runtime and more to build apps. Really exciting. We have episode 3 rescheduled is going to happen the week after, which is around AEM and 3D content. We've got the product managers from the AEM team that look after dynamic media and 3D content joining us. The following week, Zoran, will have you back, and we're going to get into single-page applications. And if you remember Danny Gordon from the first episode, Danny's joining us again, and we're going to go through some of the new announcements around the single-page application editor within AEM. And I know, Zoran, you've built some projects recently related to that as well, so that should be pretty cool. Looking forward to that one. And then the week after that, to round out July, we have Marcus Hack, who is the lead engineering member for the Commerce Integration Framework. So tying Magento and AEM together, he's going to come and share some of the work he's been doing on the project, and that should be pretty exciting. So July's going to be super fun. Lots of great topics to talk about. We're already locking in 3 or 4 sessions for August. So you'll definitely see a lot of content coming up over the next few weeks. But, really guided by the community. So if there's a topic you want to see, feel free to reach out to me and let me know. Love to get your feedback on how we can make the show more useful and relevant for you. But let's end it there. Zoran, again, thank you so much. We'll see you soon. And to everyone watching, really appreciate your time. Thanks, and see you soon.